So if you see this application, what you have done now, to-do list, you see that, okay, you are using a use state, and you are also having one use state here, right? And look at how many functions you have written, handler functions. You have written three, four handler functions now. This is handle, uh, you know, changing, yeah. Here you are updating the state, correct? For example, if I have to add, again you are calling set to-dos. If you have to delete, you will again call set to-dos. Same goes for example edit. Yeah, this like similar to this. If you write another function, yeah, another function wherein you will say edit to do, there also you will do the same function, correct? You will have to, so you will write a logic of handling or handling, meaning you kind of use setting the state, you know, in all those functions. So basically this means, okay, though you have a state defined here, you are kind of setting the state from many different places, isn't it? Yeah, you're having set state here, you're having set state here. So now if the functionality is bigger, let's say I have to mark this as done, then this, it becomes difficult, or kind of, it the complexity will increase, yeah, because you are using too many places this set state. So you are not clear where and all the setting is happening. Yeah. So from different places you are doing an update. Now, the next concept that we are trying to learn from React is, yeah, what is called as, a reducer function. Now, what is the use of this reducer function? Now, all this state handling, basically the setter functions, yeah, you are doing set, you are doing set here, you are doing some set here also, correct? Now, all this set can be, the component is doing now a lot of sets actually. So, all these sets can be moved into a completely a new function. Yeah, generally we name that function as reducer. So so all that setting the logic and actually deriving the next state. See, what is the use of setting? So you would like to update this to dos, correct? And accordingly this to dos particular state has to update on the screen, correct? So all the handling of state, now we are actually going to move into a totally new function which is called a reducer function. So you see, we are actually reducing the complexity, or reducing, the logic which is involved in a component. Here it is not just calling set to do. Yeah, these are, so you are also having this logic, you see. You are also writing this logic. You have to filter, you have to take the existing state and then update it and then set that state. You see this logic? Yeah, more than setting, you are also having a lot of logic you are writing for each of the action the user is performing. For add, you are performing, is a user action. Delete is a user action. Edit is a user action. Marking this done is also a user action. So with the next things that we are learning, we are trying to extract all this handling the state logic into a separate function which is called a reducer function. And this extracting the state into a new function is possible, yeah, with one of the hook, yeah, one more hook which is called as use reducer. What is the hook name? So we will learn what is called as a use reducer hook. But this is almost similar to use state. Yeah, the purpose of use state was to what, create a state variable to store some data as a state variable within the component. Now using reducer again, so we kind of, it kind of does the same thing as what use state is doing, but yeah, it is going to simplify what we actually do within the component. Yeah, apart from that, there are some more advantages of moving, from use state to a use reducer. And especially we do this, we use this hook when we think the state is not simple. For example, I have a simple state called, is uh, admin. I would like to store some simple state variable. Okay, a simple state like a Boolean value. Yeah. For example, set admin. Okay, and then I'll say use state false. Default it is false. Yeah. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if at all your state is having primitive values, yeah, number, a boolean, a string, simple values, then the recommendation is you can use a use state. If the state goes into something like bigger, for example, now the state is what you worked in an array of, to-do list is array of object, correct? Or you might have a case of, an object actually which you want to work with. So in these two cases, yeah, the recommendation is we use reducer, because this involves again setting also, and also you need to update this, kind of access the state, and again mutating that state is what we call, yeah, to derive the new state. So you will have too much of logic which goes within the component. Now before we understand what exactly is use reducer, okay, so let us understand one already known function actually, already known function, which is called as array.reduce. So can we just have a brief recap on what exactly this method? What is this reduce method actually? How does the reduce work in array? Anyone? In arrays we have a reduce method. Who would like to tell?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Basically, array dot reduce method
reduce
will check each and element and will return only single value
it will check each
based
and
on
every
that.
element and it will return single
Yeah,
value. Okay, anything
yeah.
else? Yeah, it will reduce the entire array into a single value. That's for sure. I agree. Yeah, that's one part of this reduce. Yeah. In terms of the syntax, what does it? How does
Uh,
the reduce
acc-
work?
accumul- accumulator
So before even accumulator,
index.
this function takes a callback function, and it also, accepts some optional initial value. This is what is a signature. First thing, accumulator will come within the callback function. Correct? There is a callback function and there is going to be an initial value. Now, these two is what is a basic syntax. Correct? Fine. Now, tell me within that callback function what does happen? Yes, there will be a first parameter called accumulator. Then it is going to
Accumulator
get the
in
current item.
current.
Correct? Then we are
Okay.
also going to get the index.
Then array.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then array also we are going to get. Yeah, exactly. This gets almost like four parameter. Yeah. Compared to the normal rest of the array methods, this it is going to get an accumulator. And another important thing is this function is going to return whatever this callback function stores, at the end, whatever this callback function stores into this accumulator. Basically this reduce method, whatever, if the return value of this reduce is completely depend on what is stored in the accumulator at the end. That's what it is going to return. And that's the same case at the end of every function also. And your final value will be there in this accumulator. Do you agree? Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is how the array reduce work. Now what we are discussing? We are discussing about use reduce. The hook is use reducer. Now the use reducer also works almost like same as this reduce function only. Here, it accepts one function called reducer function. So whatever callback function we say here, correct? similar function, and this is called as reducer, and this will reduce your inputs into a single value. Yeah, so this will reduce into a single value, and then also it accepts what? It accepts initial state also. Now we know that even in case of reduce, we have an initial value. If you pass one, that's what is available. Yeah, that's what is getting initialized to the accumulator now. And in terms of what this is returning, yeah, so you know that this is also going to have a state. Along with the state, it is going to have one other parameter called as dispatch. What it is going to have? Another function called as dispatch. Now, so this use reduce, in simple, it works kind of array reduce method, and also it is more similar to use state in terms of the syntax. Now, what exactly meaning of that? Yes, use state also accepts some initial value, correct? And then it is also going to return you the state plus setter function, correct? Isn't it? You see how it's of the same state. So use reducer also going to return the state. Now whatever at the end this reducer function is going to return, that will be there within the state. And here this reducer will be executed whenever you invoke this dispatch function. We will see examples. Then you will I think get more familiar with what exactly is this hook. Again, this is one of the core hook which is part of React. Yeah, React is producing. I mean React is providing. So with this hook, again we can maintain the state management, and preferred cases, yeah, whenever we have complex state which we are maintaining, something like an array of object instead of primitive value, then the preferred one is actually use reducer than compared to the use state. The another benefit of having this hook is this state handling logic will be totally outside the component boundary. Okay, now let me show you how exactly this works. I think, yeah, what you guys did is a to-do list. Okay, we will not first implement the to-do list. I think I'll talk about having another simple component where we can use this use reducer in simple uh, you know words actually. Okay, so let me just create one uh, you know function, yeah, one component here that will we will implement a simple counter first. What we will implement? We'll implement a simple counter example to understand the syntax of use reducer better, and then we will come back to this to-do list. We will do a refactoring of this particular application. Yeah, we'll do a refactoring of this application to make it work with the newly learned use reducer hook. Is it clear what I'm saying? So we'll first make it a simple application to get familiar with this particular syntax. All right, fine. So here is how it goes. So let's make an application by name counter. Yeah, and we'll say counter.jsx or counter.js. Both are valid extensions as I've told you. So let's make it counter.jsx also. Not an issue. What do I create? Export default counter. Yeah, this counter is a function component. So that's why function, and then I'll have a counter. So completely, I'm going to just develop one incremental decrement counter, which will increment. Along with that increment decrement, it also you know have a state, correct? So let's do it using simple use state, and then we'll also convert this, and then we'll see a complex example. Set counter use state. Okay, this is what is use state initialize with value. So can you help me how we can actually do this example using a simple use state? if at all I have to do, uh, you know, so we have seen this example if you remember, yeah, but I'm just showing you quickly so that you understand how to convert the simple logic, and then looking at different meaning, looking at the other one will be easy, very easy for you. Now let me save this, and then also in the app component I'm now mounting to-do list. Instead of to-do list, I'll make it counter for the time being. So now counter is not imported. Import counter from the dot slash counter. So, okay, in the counter use state is not defined. Uh, looks like we are using a different version of React. Okay, okay, 18. 18 onwards, it was supposed to be like, okay, React should come by default. So we no need of this import actually explicitly. Yeah, especially this React one should be there by default. And then now it is staying use state is required. Okay, so we use what is called as, what is it, named import, which is called use state. Now we got increment decrement. So tell me how the increment decrement is going to work now. For both this case, increment and decrement, I have to write simple uh, event handlers. So in that event handlers I have to write what, setting the law, setting it. So I'll write an inline event handler rather than writing separate. I'll say set counter, which is having previous and previous plus one. So can you tell me why we have to use previous and previous plus one? Why not just say counter plus one? Do you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is the reason for making counter is equal to counter plus one? I mean previous plus one.
So initial value 0 means 0 plus 1 means 1, and that is previous value is 1, and one more value previous value 1, 1 plus 2 3, and we will take like that, sir.
Okay. Now we have told whenever the state is dependent on the previous value. For example, now the counter is 0. Now the next value, next whatever I'm setting should be based on the previous value, correct? It cannot just be plus 1. And if you remember, that day we were trying to execute set counter more than once, and we saw that it was not incrementing. If you remember, the example I gave is, again, if I call set counter one, 3 times, 4 times, it was only just incrementing by once. Why? First thing is, state update happens in a batch mode actually. It doesn't happen one after the other. And to fix that problem, it is always better to have previous value, to access previous value. Now because counter has to increment based on the previous count value, it cannot just increment 0 plus 1 every time. It cannot add 0 plus 1, correct? If I am calling set state set counter, you know so this is the example. If you remember, I said counter plus 1, yeah, and I wrote this 3 times, but at the end the value which got printed was what it printed. At the end the counter became only 1. Why? Previous value did not consider. It always took whatever is there in the set. And all these three setters, if at all they're in the same function, they execute in a batch. Meaning they won't execute instantly. They, yeah. So React basically will kind of batch all these things, and executes all of them at once actually. So this was the reason we use previous plus one. So the next state is dependent on the previous state. Increment is working, decrement is also working. Correct? This example we are familiar. Now let's convert the same thing into a use reducer. What we are going to do? We are going to convert this into a use reducer. How? Yes, we need another hook called use reducer. Maybe just to preserve this example, I'll make this as a normal counter. Let me also make another counter function counter 2 so that you can compare what exactly is the difference over between these two. yeah, between these two. So now, so I'll say const, yeah, so not const. Okay, first thing is I will remove of this export default. I'll simply export it. So now it is going to take this just to test, as I have told you. So you just return some hello world first thing before even making a bigger thing. Make a simple hello world and see if this component is displaying. It means your syntax is right. That's how you should start practicing. Now the same logic in terms of incrementing, decrementing, and all that. We will see that, but we will use what is called as reducer hook. Okay, so for that, let's say state. Okay, and I told you first thing is you need an import, correct? Okay, use the hook name is use reducer, and now I can use this reducer, and the reducer syntax is okay. So it is going to accept one function. So for now, I'll just write an inline function. Yeah, and then the initial state of this is 0, correct? Initial state of the state value is 0, and let's see if I can display that state value. See now the state is displaying. If I put 100 here, yeah, or 1000, you see state is displaying whatever initial value I've given, right? Okay, for now you let's focus on how we do here. Now we need two buttons actually, correct? Just like these two buttons to increment, which is to increment and decrement. Now let's see how that is getting changed with the help of use reduce. Okay, so there is no setter. We will just make it as an empty on click. This also empty on click. Now here we don't have a setter, but we have its equivalent function, which is called as dispatch. What is its function? It's called a dispatch function. So during this on click, instead of calling setter, I now have to use a dispatch function. How do I use? Again, I have to use an arrow function. Here I would like to call dispatch. Yeah, but here again for this also I have to call dispatch only. Are you able to understand? That also dispatch, this also dispatch. But the thing is, yeah, so just like set state, you can also pass some payload to it. What is it? You can pass some data. You can pass some setter value. But more than a setter value, I'll tell you. So here we will usually pass what is called as, you know, some kind of type. What kind of, you know, dispatch you are doing? What kind of action you are dispatching? Now it's a, this is an increment action, so we want to increment. So I can define my own types actually. These are called as actions. Yeah, we are trying to handle actions. For example, if it's add, then add is an action. If it's an edit, then edit is an action. Delete, delete is an action. So now, if at all we are calling dispatch, then we have to say what type it is. These are all custom strings, custom values. Like this, I can define any number of types I want. Now, in my case, I have two types of dispatch. One, I mean, two things to dispatch. One is an increment action I want to dispatch. Another is a decrement action I want to dispatch. So to the dispatch, I am just giving, okay, this is a decrement dispatch, this is an increment dispatch. And what are these things? These are all actually types, action types. Fine. Yeah, these are all action types. Now, now if I increment and decrement, what happens? Nothing is happening. You see, even the value is also gone. Okay. So whenever you invoke this dispatch, it is going to call, this particular function. Yeah, I can have this function defined within this component, or I can also have this function defined outside So since it's a counter reducer, I'm going to, this is a normal JavaScript function. So I will call it as counter reducer. It's not a just reducer, it's a counter reducer. It is related to the counter. Now this counter reducer, yeah, counter reducer will be called with, will be called with one thing, the previous state. What it is? Previous state, and then it is going to get what is called as an action. So let's simply console log this, okay? Console log. I mean, this is a signature, huh? Signature of this reducer is it's going to take previous, it is going to show you the previous state, and it is going to also give you the action. Two parameters it is going to get for every dispatch. Now, just to show you things in action, I am showing you what are these two values. Okay, let us see. I'll do an increment now. See, what do you see in the output? You see that previous state is 1000. Yeah, because that was my initial state. It is showing that it has got previous state. Action, see in the action, whatever I passed in the dispatch is that is going in action. I can write whatever I want, but just that value goes in the action, which is the second parameter to that function. Just like the array reduce, this is the state and this is the current value. You can think of like that. So there we used to call accumulator, but here it is called state. Yeah, and this name you can put anything actually. If people will put even state also, that's also fine. But we are getting previous state. What is there in the previous state? But what is the purpose of reduce? This reduce based on the previous state plus the action should return the next state. Getting what I'm saying? Previous state, take the action and give me the next state. That's what is the purpose of reducer. But the interesting thing is this reducer will be called on every dispatch. Whenever you call dispatch, whether you pass it, don't pass it, that function gets executed. You see decrement, that time also called. Increment, that time also called. Decrement, again, that function is called. Is it clear? So instead of setter, we use dispatch. And we can pass in the data, additional data. Here I am only passing type. What is it? I'm only passing type, and this is how I'm going to get increment or decrement. Now the next thing. Okay, so what we will do, we will convert this counter. We will make this as a counter. So it is going to print actions. Yeah, I mean it's going to print increment, decrement action. So generally what we do, we kind of handle this, yeah, in a switch case. For example, now action. Action is what? Yeah, there can be two cases. One I have defined as increment. Correct. Another action is what? Decrement. There can be default action also. So switch case will have a default case also, right? So if it's a nothing, then I'm going to just return whatever is there in the previous state. Return, spelling wrong, return. So if it does not match increment or decrement, I'm just going to return the exact value. Yeah. If it is an increment, I'm going to do what? What I should do? Tell me. I should return previous state plus 1. That's all correct. If it's a decrement, then I can return previous state minus 1. That's all. You see, this is a previous state and is an action. Now we are returning the next state. Now the same thing we write in accumulator also. Accumulator, so we take the previous state and let's say you want to increment or decrement. So that's the same exact reducer function we are returning. Here there are only two parameters. We don't get anything like index and then the whole array. Fine. Now let us see if our counter is working. Let's see increment, 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 working, decrement, decrement. It is working. You see, now we moved this. Our component looks very lean, simple. It just has a pure dispatch functions and then the state. But the complex logic of, how do I produce the next state? Should I update the whole object? Yeah. Should I remove? Should I use an array map method and everything? We are going to keep in this simple function called as reducer function. Yeah. So this is kind of separation, right? Separation of the logic instead of clumsing and putting everything in all over the place, all over the component. So this pattern actually helps you, you know, to organize your business logic into a completely a new function. And this is the purpose of this hook called useReducer. We achieved the same thing. We did it's again the same thing. It's a counter, this counter and that counter. But what is the change? Change is, see here, we have to write all these setters. It's a simple logic. As I told you, for a simple case like this, it doesn't make much sense to use a reducer. But use reducer comes into handy whenever our state is, it's a complex. Example to-do list. So any question on this syntax and how it is working? Did you understand how we converted from use state to use reducer? And in terms of the syntax, and the syntax will get familiar to you. Don't worry if I have told you. Yeah. So if you start using it, then you will get familiar. Okay, what is the input and what is the basically this function is will be called how. So simple. So this whenever you call dispatch, this function gets executed. Initially, whatever you want to hold, that will be in the second parameter. And once this function called and whatever it returns, that is what will be in the state. If this function doesn't return anything, then this function, this state will also will hold an undefined value. Now that is the reason we are writing Renoswamy return statement. At the end, you should make sure that you are returning something, and that is the final value, and that return value only will be there in the state. Clear? Not clear?
Sir, can we write multiple functions inside this counter reducer function?
You want to write multiple functions? Okay, why do you want to write multiple functions? Just explain, help me to understand. I mean, it is possible. It's after all a JavaScript function. Yeah, it's after all a JavaScript
Okay.
function. So in this, yeah, you can write another functions also. Not a problem. Yes, you can write.
Okay. Here also we can pass multiple arguments, whatever we correct.
Not for this
Or
one.
only two.
Not for this one. This one, it only takes these two parameters.
Okay.
This one takes these two because see, I don't have control over how to invoke this function, correct? See, I have only written the name of the function. Here I'm receiving.
Yeah.
But tell me who is invoking this function? Dispatch. Or internally the use reducer is invoking. Dispatch is a triggering point. This will trigger that there is a new thing and then use reducer will invoke that with appropriate data. So what I'm saying is you cannot pass additional data. They have locked it, correct? You cannot invoke this directly. First of all, you cannot call this directly. That's also, you will have to use always this dispatch. Okay, so with this understanding, we can actually move on to the converting this bigger use case. I said it totally makes sense when I have something like this where my state handling Our state logic is a bit complex, correct? Yeah. So what I mean here, okay, I think in this example, it is not completely a working example, but let's do it with use reducer because you guys just did using use state, correct? Now what do we do? First thing is we need to import this hook from where? From React. Then what I'm going to get? Const const, I'm going to get a state, and then I'm going to get a dispatcher function. Again, you can name these two things like however you want. As per the syntax, that's how it is. It is what? To do reducer, correct? And it's a function, that's why we write it in lowercase. If it's a component, then we write uppercase. To do reducer, then what? Initial value. So initial value is what? Tell me what is my initial value? This initial value will be these to-dos, whatever I have kept, isn't it? These are the to-dos. Yeah, these are the existing to-dos. Yes or no? Yeah. So this to-do reducer function I have to write outside now. It need not have to be in the same file. I can move it to totally a different JavaScript file itself. Since we are writing all this logic here, I am just showing you okay how to write it. Now these to-dos goes into, yeah, again this need not have to be within this component also. You can write outside also. That's not a problem. The thing is we are trying to make the component simple. Component should not have too much of logic now. Fine. Now state is our to-do items. Now what is it? I've told you. So let's say if I'm calling add, or let's say I'm calling edit, let's say I'm calling delete, what we are supposed to do? What we are supposed to do? We are supposed to, okay, let's say if I had on, yeah, on click, correct? That's a handler we have to do. And let's say I do handle click. I'll write a function called handle click, yeah, or simply handle click. So within that handle click, yeah, I can write a function like this, or I can use an arrow function also. So within this handle click, what I should do? I should dispatch. So what is the action now? I have to add, isn't it? Yeah. So if it's a handle add click, let me show you. I'll just write handle add click now. Yeah. I am supposed to dispatch add, right? So let me show you now how just the add part alone works actually. Maybe you guys can actually complete this later on your own. Now instead of using to-dos, I will use what is called a state. That is where I have all the to-do items. Now before we make this work, so let's convert this to to-do list because that is where our to-do list application is working now. Yeah, to-do list application. I mean to-do component is rendered now. To-do application is also fine. On handle click, I mean sorry, handle add click. I am supposed to do an add, right? And here I am just doing the dispatch and to-do reducer. As I told you, let's test if this function is being called. I said this to-do reducer is going to get previous state, comma, yeah, an action. And let's check if this, first of all, this basic thing is working. I don't want to complete it. I don't want to, make it everything, work. Okay, yeah, saying, oh, no, I know, no. Let's understand slowly one by one. This will give you confidence to write next set of code. Otherwise, you will totally get confused. I have told you dispatch, whenever dispatch happens, this has to be called. Am I doing a dispatch? Yes. When I am doing, on click of this. So let's see if the setup is working. Let's try it now. I'll click on add. Okay. I click on add. Okay, there are some errors. That's okay. But you see, we got action, add. You got see previous state, three to do items. That is what clear. Okay, it is saying there is some map is undefined and all that. Yeah, cannot read a properties undefined reading map. Okay, this I know why it is, because I told you this particular function has to return something. So now it is returning undefined, and on that undefined we cannot have to do's. That's the reason. Yeah. So in simple, I just checked that it is working fine. Where action is dispatched, the reducer function is being called, and yeah, I'm able to return. Now till we make this reducer work, at the end I am just going to return the previous state as it is, so that my application works. Now you see that error is gone. Add. Now tell me, if I have to add, what I should pass till to this? Tell me. Is action is alone is enough? Do you think action alone is enough? Before that, let's also handle the use state. Use state for this input, correct? To do input and set to do input. I'll just use a setter only. We need a use state only. We cannot again replace this with a, for this simple use case, you cannot use with use reducer. Okay, use state, empty value. Now this to do input is on changing of this input. I'm going to update what? So there will be an event. That event will have a value called event.target.value will have the input value. So I'll say set to do input e dot target dot value. Yeah, use state need to be imported. Let's write a import for use state also. Is that clear? Yeah. So this to do input is where I have the additional value. So can I pass it to the dispatch like this? Let's see if it works. Yeah, I'll add test add and click on add. Do you see it is coming in the action? And I told you to this function you can only pass two parameters. But now I have got two values to pass. Tell me how to do it. Any idea? This function can only take one parameter, but I have got to pass two values. How?
अरे
Yeah, so it's very simple. We need to convert this into an object. Now instead of, we cannot pass a simple value just like that. So since it only accepts one parameter, I have to convert this as an object. In that case, I have to give some name to it. I'll say type. This is already said type. So we say it was an action actually. Yeah, I can use it action. So we will say type. And this is a value, correct? This is a value. We can call any key. Okay. In standard, people you'll use this one as type. That's why I've used type. Here, this one can be a value. It can be a payload. Yeah. So we usually say payload. What do we say? We usually say payload. Payload is nothing but data. Now let's see what is happening now. Add. I'll type to do add. Now again I'll try to say add. You see now action what is go. So action is an object now. It has two things. Type add and then payload also. So now with this it becomes easy for us now. Okay, just similar to the case we did. Again we use it's very frequently that we use switch statement, because we know that the state is getting modified and different things. Now instead of action we say action dot type, because that's what is the case in which we would like to switch to. So case, if it is coming as add, then I would like to do something. If default, I would like to do something. What is that I would like to do? I would like to simply return the previous state. So now this statement is no longer required. Now what I should do in case of add, tell me. If at all I'm adding a new to do item, how did you do? How did you use a set to dos? You took previous to dos, correct? So which are there in previous state, isn't it? You took whatever is there in the previous state and then you added a new to do. How did you add to do? You made an object out of it. So you made ID, yeah, you took ID, comma, you put description. The description is whatever you added is actually action.payload. So in payload, whatever is coming, that is what you put it in description. At the end, completed, false. By default, it is not completed, isn't it? And what is the ID value? What is the ID value? Oh, just a second. I think there's a power cut at my place. Let me switch to.
Yes, sir. No, sir, no. Yeah, actually we lost your yeah. Now it's fine. Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, sir. Uh, sir, your voice is break. Yeah. Yes, now it's fine. Yeah. Yeah, again it's breaking. Raj bro, for you also same, right?
Your voice is able to hear through. Arun sir voice only is not able. No, sir, still facing the same problem. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
I think my it is back. So let's continue. So let's continue what we were doing with the add. So I was telling for the add to work, we were trying to see, how do we get the next ID value? So I was showing a logic that, you know, let's say you have done the same thing using previously. So we need a next ID value. What is there in the next ID value? I'm just trying to dynamically take the last element's ID value and then increment it by 1. Getting what I'm saying? I'm just trying to take a last element ID and then plus 1. So the next ID will be previous element plus 1, which is going to make a next ID, and that next ID is what I'm going to assign while adding. See now? So that is how I'm constructing the next state. This is the same piece what you used to use with useState. This is nothing different with respect to useReducer. Only that this logic now is moved to this useReducer function. Earlier that same logic was there within this handle add function. Yeah, but this handle add logic now became very simple and it became one simple function dispatch. Now how you would like to add it, it's all here. But internal logic, okay, how you want to manipulate and derive the next state, that is what goes in the reducer. Now you see, I'll add another, let's see if it works. Okay, and also we can even do a console log, correct? We can do a console log, test, add, to do. See now, it came. It came or not? Came, right? Now if I simply have some console log, do I have a console log? Console log was cleared. I'll save this. Yeah, I'll add a 10, so add to do 2. Okay, interesting. I'm wondering why this method is not being, this previous state is not being printed. Wait a second. Yeah, and this also needs to be cleared, correct? The input also needs to be cleared, but that will happen mostly within this function itself, which is set to do input to empty. That's fine, but the thing is, I wanted to see test add. Okay, interesting to see why this particular function values are not displayed. Okay, I can also write another console log. So we know that it is executing in reducer, but I only seeing why this previous state is not being displayed. Yeah, default I'm returning previous state. Am I missing something? And I believe this is the same. Yeah, yes, this is the same one which I am working on now. Let me do a quick reload. Since my program broke, let's see if it is going to print now. Test. See, I think that time it broke, that's why it was not printing. So now you see, I'm going to clearly get what was the previous state and what is the next action which happened, and then I'm going to get the next final state, and that's what gets updated. Do you understand? Now we are doing the same to do, but with the help of reducer. And I've been telling, with the help of reducer, the state handling logic becomes simple. But more than that, this state now, whatever you're changing, it kind of becomes, it's a predictable one. Yeah, you will be able to trace it actually, like what is going on. Okay, how did it, how we got this new value, because you can track what is the previous state and you can check what is in the action state. I mean, what is in the action and what is coming in the previous state. So likewise, every update to the state is also becomes like, you can kind of track what is going on. how it understood. I mean how it changed to the next state. You able to follow what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's called predictable state update. Yeah. So now state becomes like a predictable. Okay, you can clearly understand. Okay, what is happening, what is the previous, and what is the next thing. Why it changed. Also, it is very clear if I am having something like a reducer function like this. But which was not the case if I use a simply use state and then just update somewhere in some handle click or some handle change. I won't be able to understand what actually made this next state, how I'm in this current state now. Did, did somebody add, did somebody delete? Now everything will be tracked. Let's say I do a delete, and then now what I should do? So again I have to dispatch another action in case it is delete, and also I have to pass a payload. Yes, I have to pass a payload because delete should tell me which item I should delete for that. Yeah, so here I will say on click, I'll say and click is handle delete. Yeah, and in handle delete I should be writing another action. Let me show you. So here instead of type add, let's say delete, and payload I should be passing to this particular function itself whatever item I am actually looping through. I have to pass it, so that's why I'm taking a different version or different way of writing this handler, on click handler. So here I can pass this item if I have. So we generally write this arrow function, so whenever I want to call the function and also pass a value. So that's what is this item. Now this item I can receive it in this function. Now that's the same item, I have to pass it as a payload. It's not to do in this case, it is some item I would like to delete. Now when I do a dispatch, or I'm trying to click on delete, you see that we will be able to log previous state as well as the next state. Since I've commented it, it is not going to come. So let's say if I do console log and then say, let's say action, then you can see that I would be able to see both the values, meaning the state. See, there is a delete being called with what payload? With this payload. Is it clear? Now how do I handle the delete? Again I have to write one more case statement. You see, likewise writing reducer also becomes a lot simpler. Yeah. So now you'll have to return the next state. How will you do? Yeah, for this again you have to return the next state. Returning by what? By removing that ID. How do you do? Yeah. So we can have a filter function. The filter will return a new state. Correct? Yeah, I can take previous state, whatever was there, do a filter, and then in that filter make sure whatever is item you are filtering, if item dot id is equals to, I mean it should not be not equal to because I have to remove that item. So item not equal to action dot payload. Yeah, action dot payload has a item to delete. Okay, so I'll take a variable item to delete. Where is it coming in? Action dot payload. Now, so this payload has item to delete. Now I can say item to delete dot id. It should not match to that id. That item I have to return. So now this filter is anyhow going to return me a new array. And that's all in the delete. So likewise I can go on adding any number of case statement I want, and I can increase my reducer logic, but still it becomes very simple because yeah, it's all only the state logic which is being handled in this reducer. Now I delete. See, now this is gone, but I can understand from the action what happened. Yeah, it basically delete was fired. Here again I can delete. Yes, delete was fired. Okay, so this is what is actually use reducer hook. Yeah, which is nothing but extracting the state logic into a reducer function instead of having all over the, you know, the component. Yeah, we don't want to duplicate that logic. But then there is a benefit actually. Yeah. So if at all we do like this, we extract, then it becomes the debugging. Okay, debugging becomes very easy compared to the use state. And more than that, testing actually. Testing this logic becomes very easy because I can just call the use reducer function, or I can just test the component alone. Yeah, not that state dispatch logic and all that. So that way, so testing becomes separate, and I just have to separately test each of the things. Reducer alone can be separately tested. Component anyhow usually will be separately tested. But one important thing you'll have to remember, the reducer must be a pure function. Yeah. So in JavaScript we have something called pure function. So on the same concept, this reducer also works. What it means that, so for a given set of input, output should be always same. In simple, if I call add 2 comma 3, always it should return 5. Again, if I pass 2 comma 3, yeah, this is one condition. Yeah, it should return always 5. 2 comma 3 next time 5. So that's what is pure. Okay. And on top of that, we also said you should not modify the input. Okay, whatever inputs you receive, you should not modify it. Yeah. So now what is the condition? This reducer we should write in such a way that it should be a pure. It should not modify the previous state. You see, we are not directly modifying the previous state. We are updating. I mean, we are creating a new state. That is what is being written actually here. Though we use this, we are not directly mutating. We are not modifying it. Okay, I think I'll stop here. I mean, this is what is actually, uh, you know,